Thank you, Alexis. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivia Antonio, and I am the Farmworker Health Training Coordinator at NCFH. Today, we're going to be talking about best practice for increasing pesticide safety knowledge among Indigenous farm workers. You can go to the next slide. So this is how our agenda is going to look like today. So first, we're going to start out by going over the project overview. We'll also be going over phase one focus groups. We will also be going over phase two training, which will be led by my colleague Yvette. Um, we'll have MICOP do their presentation on their parts, also answering some question and discussions, going over some evaluations, and lastly, we have some resources for you guys. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so we'll start out with the project overview and some background on the project itself and how it started. So this project was created to collaborate with Indigenous farm workers in the Texas Rio Grande Valley and in Southern California to develop translated educational videos about pesticide safety into three Indigenous languages. So although there are many pesticide safety resources available in Spanish and English, very few resources are focused on Indigenous farm workers from Mesoamerica. So during this project, NCFH took the role to work with our Tzotzil and Tzotzil farm workers speakers, while our community partner, MICOP, or more known as Mixteco Indigena Community Organizing Project, focused on our Mixteco farm worker speakers. So for this project, two objectives were focused, with one of them being to enhance the capability of partners to develop and implement programs and activities that prevent and reduce pesticide risk to communities of farm workers and agriculture pesticide handlers. The second address objective was to educate farm workers and or agricultural pesticide handlers on the safe use of pesticide. So this project was a 2-year project and it was completed in two different phases, with phase one being the focus group feedback and then phase two being the workers training. Next slide, please. So we'll start out with a background on focus groups and how it was conducted. So during phase one, we mainly wanted to hear or learn more about the information from our Indigenous farm workers. So know their background. So we collaborated with PERC to identify a training that specifically gave a focus on pesticide safety for farm workers. So during the focus groups, we did two focus groups. So the first one was to learn about the farm workers' feedback and also learn about feedback from individuals that represent farm worker serving organizations. These focus groups were done in two different time. So the first focus group was done with farm workers with a total of 12 participants, with 6 being Tzotzil, 6 being Sartal Indigenous speakers. And these workers were from the Rio Grande Valley, and it was conducted by our outreach team. Also, 10 individuals representing farm workers were in a focus group, and this focus group was conducted by our research team. And for our farm worker focus group, we provided interpretation using one of our partners' organizations. Next slide, please. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So during phase one, the translation of the videos happened. So So after we did our focus group, we dived into translating and recording and dubbing the videos. And this was done with the help, this was done by incorporating the feedbacks that we got from our farm workers whenever they did the focus groups. So the translation and recording into Tzotzil and Tzeltal was done by using the existing PERC video um, that was the translation and the recording was done into Tzotzil and Tzeltal, and it was used using an existing PERC video. And this translation recording was done using the help of our partner organization called Cielo, who is Comunidades Indígenas en Liderazgo organization. And then later it was dubbed by our internal communications team at NCFH. So once the video was completed, we conducted a second wave of focus group, and that included a total of 20 farm workers, which were 10 Tzotzil speakers and 10 Tzeltal speakers. And for this round, the videos were shown to our farm workers, and each group, they had their chance to share their feedbacks on what they like and what they dislike about the video. Just like focus group 1, for focus group 2, we provided interpretation services as well. Also by using some of our partner organizations. So some of the feedbacks that we heard back from our farm workers regarding the video was mainly pointing towards pesticide safety information, needs and desires. So they mentioned to us that they wanted to learn more on how they could take care of themselves. They did not see a lot of that information being shown in the video. They also mentioned the communication styles and some video considerations. So for them, they wanted the subtitles and the audio to both be in the same language. So for example, each video has the subtitles and the audio in Tzeltal or in Tzotzil. And also they suggested the video be in 15 to 20 minutes long maximum, but also have all the information needed. You can go to the next slide. Lastly, I want to talk about the outreach and how the recruitment went. So we did face some challenges when it went to recruiting. So the project actually started during onion peak season at the RGV Valley. So a lot of the workers were like working nonstop, especially because they were getting paid by the piece and not by the hour. So it's kind of hard to get the workers to come in and to like do these trainings. But we also offered gift cards that came in handy for them. And it also like helped them or helped us prioritize the time to meet. So that's a little recap on phase 1 and how it went down. And also my colleague is going to talk about how focus group 1, focus group 2, and the video dubbing recording, how it was implemented for the trainings for part 2. So I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Thank you, Olivia. We could move on to the next slide, please. So, hi, everybody. My name's Yvette Salinas. I'm with NCFH. And yeah, like Olivia mentioned, I'll be talking about the second phase of this project, which was training farm workers, using those videos that were translated, that were dubbed, that were reviewed by the focus groups that Olivia just detailed, and they were all translated into these indigenous languages. So that's what we use for these trainings. So I'm going to be sharing some of the highlights of the lessons that we learned throughout this part of the process. We could move on to the next slide, please. Okay, and I can start off by talking about the recruitment for these trainings. We began these trainings in the month of August last year. And we did outreach, throughout the summer, which is one of the hottest times of year in the Rio Grande Valley. And during this season, unlike the season that Olivia mentioned, where workers were paid by the piece rate, workers were being paid by the hour, and there's a lot fewer workers actively in the fields over the summer, which already made recruitment more challenging. So for the workers that we did encounter, they were cleaning the fields or maybe like prepping the land for future planting. And the connection with them felt difficult, like more difficult to connect with them than many other years of us doing outreach in the fields. And when we had the chance to talk to them, workers were hesitant to open up. They were hesitant to talk to us, even share their contact information, let alone asking them to host a meeting in their home or to come to a public space to attend a training for pesticide safety. So they were very distrusting. And this was at a time last year when we started seeing more and more raids by ICE, or at least compared to previous years. So that made things a lot more difficult for us. And for those of you that don't know, the Rio Grande Valley, the RGV as we call it, is just a handful of miles away from the Mexican border, and it's pretty common for the farms to be like on the south side of the border wall while still being in the United States. Like it's uh, surveillance and border patrol is something that we see often, and even like that historically, or at least in the time that I've been meeting farm workers on the field, workers have been fairly open to receiving information from community health workers or even sharing details about their lives with outreach workers like myself. Um, so, last year it was just more effective for us to connect with farm workers through the farm labor contractors, given the situation. So we met an FLC who was who she seemed to really care about her group of workers and advocate for them, and she really understood the importance um, of having the workers know their rights, especially during this climate. Um, and one of the FLCs who we met told us about an incident where she interacted directly with the law enforcement on behalf of the workers, which, helped diffuse the situation, and it also helped the workers trust their employer even more. So something that we did differently was, first we worked with the FLC directly, and before we even did any kind of training for pesticide safety, we were able to share information about their worker rights. This is what their main concern. This was their main concern. So of course, we were happy to do that. We provided information about, what to do if law enforcement stops you, what documents should you have, and what does a valid warrant look like? Your typical like know your rights 101 information, and that really opened up doors for us and helped us gain the trust of the workers. And it was both beneficial for us and also for the workers, because the FLCs even paid their workers for the time that they spent receiving the Know Your Rights training and like on the field. And I think this helped the trust grow, even more between all of us. And I think they were more comfortable participating outside of the field setting for a longer training on pesticide safety because of that. And the FLC in this case was very supportive. They helped us by lending us their home. They provided chairs and tables, and they helped with transportation. So that was very helpful, because we did struggle um, to find Indigenous workers who wanted to participate. So partnering with trusted employers was key, to overcoming these recruitment barriers. We could move on to the next slide, please. All right, so overall, during the trainings, we were able to reach 24 Celtal speaking workers. During this phase, we didn't work with any Tzotzil speakers who, we'd previously worked with in the focus groups because, we didn't find anybody who wanted to participate. So our focus was on Celtal. Um, and I think Olivia mentioned, Celtal is a language that's spoken in Chiapas, Mexico, and we have a lot of workers who immigrate to the United States from Chiapas in this area. And our trained interpreter who supported us remotely was also from Chiapas. And we did run into some technical challenges during the session, and it seemed like the tech gods weren't on our side because most of the connectivity issues it happened on our end. Our interpreter told us that she traveled to a main city to ensure that she had strong internet access during the interpretation, the days that we needed interpretation. Um, but the thing was that we were hosting the trainings in a very rural area that's outside of the city limits. Here in Texas, they're known as colonias. And the internet signal was, often unreliable, but despite those challenges, we estimate that at least like 80% of the training was successfully interpreted. Yeah, like the training that wasn't already in Celtal, of course, because those videos were already translated in Celtal. And the interpretation worked very well. It was continuous interpretation, which meant that the workers they had an opportunity to hear the key messages twice. Especially the stuff that we were saying, which was in Spanish, and then again it was reinforced in their native language. And then based on our observations. Um, the workers they showed pretty strong comprehension or like understanding in Spanish and in Celtal because like during the activities that we had between the videos when we asked something in Spanish they were like eager to respond right away in Spanish and like sometimes they would forget that we'd have to pause for the interpretation but this told us that they were clearly following along and understanding that interaction in Spanish. And of course, being in front of them it makes that even easier for them to want to respond in Spanish. But in terms of the subtitles, many of them shared that they do not read Celtal. Um, and they mentioned noticing that the words at the bottom of the screen were in Celtal, but they said that most of them were following along by listening and watching the videos. So we just observed that maybe the subtitles had limited impact, but um, we did ask them, about their language preference for the subtitles after that, just in casual conversation. And they mentioned like it was like mixed for them. Some preferred Spanish and then others preferred Celtal. But I think the general sentiment that they expressed was appreciation and gratitude that the trainings videos were just created and available in their native language. We could move on to the next slide, please. Okay, and some other observations that we made is that we noticed better engagement from workers who attended in the morning or midday, if it was their day off, over those who came in to our training after work, which is understandable. Anybody who would be tired after working a long day in the sun. And in those meetings where we had support from the FLCs, we noticed the most attentiveness and the most engagement from the workers. And, we're not sure if it was just like out of obligation to their boss or again, because it was like earlier in the day. And for the surveys, which we'll talk more in detail about, for the during the training, we shared paper, like written pre and post tests, and we read the questions out loud in Spanish, and then we had them interpreted in Celtal by our interpreter. And it seemed that during every training, the workers needed support, completing the questions that had words on them, or especially the ones that had words on them. And then we just noticed that questions that had pictures as answer choices improved their understanding of the question. So that's something that we would certainly continue to do as a best practice. We could move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so one thing that worked really well was the hands-on activity that we added in between the video lessons. We had, these dinámicas, as we say in Spanish, to keep people engaged. For example, we pause the video right after a section that talks about the white residue that's left on crops after, the pesticides are sprayed. And when no one was looking, my co-presenter, my co-trainer, she quietly like put baby powder on a mango. And, we paused the video and she passed around the mango and repeated some of the key messages that they heard in Celtal, for that lesson during the video. Like, the white powder is toxic and you must wash your hands, it's easily transferred, etc. And if you take a look at the photo here on the slide, you'll see that workers were eating popcorn and they were drinking a beverage. And we never told them that it was baby powder on, the mango that they were passing around. And what was really powerful was that, every person immediately, like they stopped eating and they got up to wash their hands using a water hose that was outside with some soap. And no one told them to do it. It was like just a brief activity that we felt drove the point home. And it was sort of like funny to see because they didn't know at the time that it wasn't baby powder. And then of course later we told them. But we felt that activity was very effective, especially because sometimes these videos could run long, and it was just like a simple thing that we were able to do um, to check for understanding. And something that we felt worked well with the activities too is that it was like flexible. We were able to adapt them with whatever we had on hand. We didn't always have like items that we would carry with us. So for example, there's a section in the video where that talks about like what clothing workers should wear in the field, after it's been sprayed with pesticides. So instead of, showing all the gear, which we didn't always have on us, we turned it into a group activity and, gave ourselves a grade just based on what we were already wearing. So when we asked the workers, we got comments like, okay, well, in order to be dressed well, we would need, Jose's hat, and we would need Juan Carlos's face scarf, and Julio's shoes, and so-and-so's jeans, and this was a great way to check, that they were following along, that they were understanding these like long lessons between the videos. And this was also happened to be one of the pre and post questions in our surveys, which everybody got correct, of course, because it was something that we incorporated throughout the videos, in between the videos. And then, okay, here on the logistics side for the trainings, we anticipated cancellations just based on our experience with the focus groups, and it was very important for us to stay flexible with the workers' schedules, and also keeping the interpreter informed because it was another person that we had to coordinate with since we didn't have someone in-house to do the interpretation. And they all were also very flexible when we needed to shift dates and times at the last minute. So we're very thankful for that. And then we also knew that we had to build in like an hour or two before the training to pick up workers or drop them off, since this area in the Rio Grande Valley, it's very spread out like geographically. So that was something that worked for us. And then, of course, food is always a plus, or I should say it's like a must, we felt that it was essential. There's a saying in Spanish that goes, panza llena, corazón contento. And, it's like you have a full belly and you have a happy heart, and it makes learning a lot easier, especially after a long work day. So we definitely recommend food for longer trainings. And we could move on to the next slide, please. All right. And finally, we get to the results. And these are a few highlights from the pre and post test that I alluded to earlier. So both the pre and post tests included 6 questions. Before we showed them the video, we passed out a pre-test to assess the participants' like baseline knowledge of the material. And at least 4 participants out of or more, they answered the questions incorrectly on the pre-test. And then one of the most challenging questions that was asked in the test was, who is an early entry worker? And 8 of the 24 participants answered that incorrectly. They interpreted it as someone who works early in the morning rather than a person who's allowed to enter a field earlier, after it's been sprayed with pesticides. And then the second most challenging question on the pre-test was focused on the symptoms of pesticides exposure. 7 out of the 24 participants answered that one incorrectly. And they commonly chose the response that the symptom is hunger and thirst. But then after the training, we were happy to see a huge improvement on the post-test results, because all of the questions were answered correctly, except for the early entry question, which was the more difficult question in the pretest. We did see progress because only 2 out of the 24 participants answered that incorrectly, as opposed to like the 8. But maybe this is something where we could refine the wording or something on that question in the future. We did go over it with them, sort of as an opportunity to share the correct answer. But overall, the post-test results, I felt, showed us that there was an increase in knowledge across all the participants that joined us in the training. And we can move on to the next slide. I believe that's my last slide. Okay, now we're going to hear from MICOP's project. Ahora nuestras compañeras de MICOP van a hablar sobre el proyecto de la fase 1 y la fase 2.
Hola, buenos días. Creo que esta es nuestra oportunidad. Somos de la organización del proyecto Mixteco Indígena. Estamos aquí para presentar un poco de lo que compartieron las compañeras también. Gracias por la invitación para compartir el trabajo de MICOP, y agradecemos todo el apoyo del Centro Nacional para la Salud de Trabajador Agrícola. Queremos compartir con ustedes las mejores prácticas para aumentar el conocimiento sobre la seguridad de pesticida entre trabajadores agrícolas indígenas. Próxima diapositiva, por favor. Gracias. Para esto se llevaron a cabo 2 grupos focales con un total de 20 participantes mixtecos. En el primer grupo focal, la información sobre pesticidas es limitada y poco frecuente. El video suele mostrarse solo una vez, lo que dificulta la comprensión, falta de transparencia de algunos empleadores sobre los pesticidas utilizados. Ellos mismos rechazan bueno, la comunidad rechaza a folletos e infografías por limitaciones de alfabetización. Preferencia clara por un video como herramienta educativa. En el segundo grupo focal, ah, vimos que el video fue 90% comprensible, especialmente en variantes cercanas de San Martín Peras. Se recomendó enfocarse en variantes específicas del Mixteco. La sugerencia para mejorar la música de fondo y reforzar la precisión cultural. Por eso, cuando vean el video en Mixteco, la música va a ser diferente que en la música original. Para estos dos grupos focales, el reclutamiento comenzó un mes antes y se realizó durante eventos regulares de divulgación comunitaria. Se explicó el proyecto en espacios breves de 5 minutos, resaltando el propósito y la importancia de la participación. Se evaluó a las personas interesadas con criterios claros. Las preguntas que hicimos es de que si se identifican como mixtecos, si viven aquí en el condado de Ventura y también si son trabajadores agrícolas. Una vez seleccionadas, se realizaron llamadas de seguimiento para explicar el objetivo, la logística y confidencialidad e incentivos. Cuando hablamos de la palabra incentivo, en este contexto se refiere no solo a la compensación monetaria, sino también el valor del conocimiento lingüístico y cultural de los participantes. También proporcionamos comida, bebida, y también uno de los miembros del equipo estuvo disponible para supervisar las actividades con los niños si era necesario. Retos que tuvimos en estos fue la retención de los participantes durante sesiones largas y horarios después del trabajo. Nosotros hicimos las reuniones entre semana, entonces sí, pienso que gracias a la comida, al cuidado de niños, fue que pudimos retenerlos. Y en cuanto a los logros, fue una alta participación comunitaria y retroalimentación significativa, referencias claras por el video sobre materiales escritos. Próxima diapositiva, por favor. Es el de atrás. Esa. Experiencia del proceso de la traducción. Ahí pueden ver una foto mía con el compañero de radio. En la fase de grabación trabajamos con el compañero de radio indígena, y otros compañeros que tenían el equipo para grabar los audios. Al inicio grabamos los audios por partes y por párrafos, sin considerar exactamente el tiempo original del audio en español ni la duración de cada escena. Esto provocó que al momento de montar los audios en Mixteco sobre el video original en español, los tiempos no coincidieran, lo que representó un reto grande para la compañera encargada de la edición. Gracias a la organización y al trabajo en equipo, logramos grabar otra vez los audios siguiendo el ritmo y los tiempos de las escenas originales. Obviamente tuvimos que hablar con los colaboradores que nos dieran un poco más de tiempo y todo eso. Entonces, finalmente logramos entregar el video en Mixteco con una calidad que refleja el esfuerzo, la coordinación y el aprendizaje del equipo. Ah, esta experiencia nos dejó herramientas muy valiosas para futuros proyectos de traducción audiovisual en lenguaje indígena. El audio se produjo en la variante mixteca de San Martín Peras, Oaxaca, comprendida por 21 comunidades identificadas. Para asegurar la comprensión amplia, se adaptaron algunas expresiones. Algunas palabras se dicen de forma muy distinta dependiendo de la variante, por lo que tuvimos que buscar términos que pudieran entenderse en variantes, en varias variantes. Por ejemplo, la frase puedes morir, cuando en las escenas habla de que puedes morir si te expones a los pesticidas, se dice de manera diferente según la variante. Así que decidimos usar la expresión equivalente como acabar contigo, ¿no? Que se entiende de forma más general y transmite el mismo mensaje. Am, la traducción del video, compuesto por 6 escenas y 7 páginas, tomó aproximadamente un mes, lo que también tuvimos retos en la grabación. Uno de los principales fue que no todas las palabras en español tienen una traducción directa al mixteco, lo que nos obligó a investigar definiciones y buscar la forma más clara de transmitir el mensaje. En algunos casos, las palabras que en español tomaban 3 segundos en decirse, en mixteco podría tomar hasta 10 segundos, pues según la definición, lo que afectaba el ritmo del video. Entonces, de esa experiencia aprendimos varias lecciones clave. Es fundamental respetar los tiempos de las escenas originales desde el inicio del proceso de la grabación, y los audios deben grabarse por escenas y no solo por párrafos, para así facilitar la edición y el montaje. El proyecto logró crear un material cultural y lingüísticamente apropiado, aumentar la comprensión sobre la seguridad en el uso de pesticidas, fortalecer la confianza y participación de comunidades mixtecas diversas. Este enfoque demuestra la información, la, este enfoque demuestra la importancia de trabajar desde el idioma y la cultura para lograr una educación efectiva en salud y seguridad laboral. Ahora sí, la próxima diapositiva, por favor. En esta vamos a hablar del segundo año, que es el enfoque en los entrenamientos en Mixteco. La capacitación en el lenguaje mixteco se llevó a cabo en 2 partes debido a retos relacionados con la asistencia de los participantes. En algunas ocasiones, como mencionan las compañeras, fue por el clima político que estamos viviendo ahora con migración. Inicialmente se agendaron los 20 participantes, sin embargo, por diversas razones, incluyendo la de las redadas de ICE, no pudieron asistir. Durante los entrenamientos, los participantes recibieron un incentivo económico como reconocimiento al valor de su conocimiento lingüístico y cultural. Además, se les proporcionó comida y bebida también en estas reuniones. Al principio se hizo la llamada a 20 participantes para tomarles la preprueba, pero en el primer entrenamiento solo asistieron 14. Y ya en el segundo, en el segundo entrenamiento asistieron otros 6. Por lo que pues también a los otros 6 participantes se les tomó la preprueba antes del entrenamiento. El entrenamiento fue en la oficina de MICOP en la tarde, después de sus horas de trabajo. Los participantes también son parte de otros programas de MICOP. Tenemos varios programas y lo cual suelen tener reuniones, entonces nosotros tratamos de que no hubiese otras reuniones que también intervinieran en esto. Para el desarrollo de las actividades se utilizaron diversos materiales, incluyendo pues el video ya traducido en Mixteco, demostraciones y ejemplos visuales. Se emplearon frutas sugeridas por los colaboradores, talco para simular el polvo del pesticida. Además, el equipo de MICOP elaboró 2 muñecos. Creo que más enseguida los van a ver. Son 2 muñecos que pudieron vestir los participantes como parte de una actividad demostrativa sobre el uso adecuado de la vestimenta de trabajo para prevenir la exposición a pesticidas. Perdón, los participantes se divirtieron en equipos de hombre y mujer para vestir al personaje correspondiente. Los hombres vistieron al muñeco hombre y las mujeres a la muñeca femenina, lo cual generó un ambiente participativo y positivo. Durante esta actividad, uno de los comentarios destacados fue la importancia de usar una camiseta abajo de la camisa que tiene botones, ya que el polvo pues, del pesticida puede ingresar al cuerpo a través de esos espacios. Ok. Hacia la parte final del entrenamiento, al solicitar retroalimentación sobre el instructor, los materiales, el formato y el aprendizaje obtenido, se identificaron retos relacionados con la alfabetización. Por ellos, se brindó apoyo a los participantes para expresar sus respuestas de forma oral, a las cuales posteriormente fueron escritas en español. Perdón. Y los comentarios que ellos tuvieron los escribimos en unas etiquetas con etiquetas adhesivas y después las colocamos en el rotafolio, respetando en todo momento lo que ellos deseaban comunicar. Ahora en la próxima diapositiva, ahí sí podemos ver a los muñecos ya vestidos. Y en las otras escenas, creo que en las otras fotos sí podemos ver la actividad que ellos tuvieron. Después de estas actividades, los cambios observados en el conocimiento y comportamiento a partir de los resultados de las prepruebas, se observó que aproximadamente el 50% de los participantes no pudo responder correctamente a las preguntas relacionadas con la seguridad de pesticida. Esto evidenció una brecha importante en el acceso a información comprensible y culturalmente apropiado. Sin embargo, después de la capacitación, los resultados de las postpruebas mostraron una mejora significativa, ya que la mayoría de los participantes respondió correctamente a las respuestas. Este cambio demuestra la importancia de ofrecer entrenamientos en el idioma y la variante lingüística, en la variante lingüística adecuada. Durante la capacitación, varios participantes comentaron que anteriormente habían recibido entrenamientos en sus lugares de trabajo en español, pero son muy breves y entonces la información sobre pesticidas es muy limitada y que no logran comprenderlos no, por completo porque no son en su lengua materna. Y también después del entrenamiento no ofrecen como sus jefes o sus mayordomos no ofrecen recursos de dónde o con quién pueden hacer preguntas. Al recibir la información en Mixteco y con apoyo visual, pudieron entender mejor los conceptos y sentirse más seguros y participar. Am, el impacto del uso de imágenes en la comprensión de la seguridad de pesticidas, que el video está lleno de imágenes, imágenes y escenas muy comprensibles, am, y demostraciones prácticas, tuvo un impacto clave en la comprensión de los temas. Los ejemplos visuales ayudaron a reforzar conceptos como las rutas de exposición a pesticidas, la importancia de la vestimenta adecuada y las prácticas de protección personal. Las actividades prácticas facilitaron la participación activa y permitieron que los participantes re- ah, relacionan la información con sus experiencias diarias en el trabajo agrícola. Además, el uso de imágenes ayudó a superar las barreras de alfabetización, permitiendo que los participantes comprendieran el mensaje sin depender exclusivamente de la lectura o la escritura, como lo comentaban las compañeras anteriormente en los subtítulos. También se observó un aumento de la confianza para hacer preguntas, compartir experiencias y expresar dudas, lo cual es fundamental para promover prácticas laborales más seguras. Una de las recomendaciones que tenemos en este espacio a partir de las retroalimentaciones recibidas, la comunidad expresó su interés en que este material esté disponible para un público más amplio. Por ello, se recomienda implementar una campaña de difusión comunitaria para dar a conocer el video y los recursos educativos. Algunas estrategias sugeridas incluyen la difusión a través de MICOP, Radio Indigena, a las plataformas digitales de MICOP y colaboraciones con el Condado de Ventura, considerando que muchas comunidades campesinas se encuentran en esa región. Am, Asimismo, se recomienda continuar desarrollando materiales educativos en en lenguas indígenas, fortaleciendo el uso de recursos visuales, por ejemplo, el video de Mixteco, que está titulado como Ley de Protección al Trabajador de WPS para trabajadores agrícolas, y asegurar que los entrenamientos sean facilitados por dos personas que hablen mixteco, am, que fueran en dos diferentes variantes con el fin de maximizar el impacto y la comprensión. Por mi parte, recomendaría mucho que los entrenamientos fueran también dados por personas de habla mixteca en por lo menos igual dos variantes diferentes para poder responder a preguntas Preguntas frecuentes que surgen durante o al final del entrenamiento, ya que suelen haber cambios en las palabras, como aquí puedo darles un ejemplo: comer para la variante de San Martín Peras es cushion, para mi variante es cachao. También otro de los ejemplos es trabajar. Em, en mi variante se dice sachun, en el variante de San Martín Peras se dice cachiño. El sudor, para mí, para mi variante es chachío, y para la variante de San Martín Peras es chije. Entonces, es muy, muy importante. Ya, vamos a concluir. Muchas gracias por el espacio.
Muchas gracias, Norma. Thank you very much, Norma, for sharing us with that great uh, summary of the work that you have been doing for the last 2 years. For everyone else, this concludes the content part of the webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. And then we're going to move on to our Q&A.